It wasn't a sudden market glitch. It wasn't a geopolitical accident. It wasn't even a failure of leadership. It was the inevitable result of a mathematical trap, a signal that flashes red long before the chaos arrives. The pattern is unmistakable. History is littered with empires that believed they were exceptions. They were wrong. Every single time a sovereign power faces a specific fiscal wall, they react in exactly the same way. The arithmetic is merciless. When the cost of maintaining the empire exceeds the ability to tax the citizenry, the rules change. The money itself changes. This is the signal. It has appeared in ancient capitals. It has appeared in early modern Europe. It has appeared in the industrial age. And current data suggest it is flashing again today. To understand the gravity of this moment, we must look backward. We must examine 3 specific instances where this signal predicted the end of an era. First, consider the Roman Empire. The year is 64 AD. Emperor Nero faces a budget crisis. The costs of the army and the bureaucracy are crushing. Taxation is already maximized. Raising taxes further risks rebellion. Cutting spending risks a coup. So, Nero chooses the third door. He orders the mint to reduce the silver purity of the denarius from 100% to 90%. It seems harmless, a minor adjustment to keep the legions paid. But the signal had been sent. The discipline was broken. Over the next 2 centuries, that 90% became 50, then 5, then barely a trace of silver wash on a copper coin. By the 3rd century, the currency had collapsed. Prices for wheat skyrocketed. A soldier's pay, once sufficient to buy a farm, could barely buy a loaf of bread. The middle class was wiped out. Trade disintegrated. The empire fractured because the trust in the unit of account had vanished. Just like the Roman debasement, the Spanish Empire in the 16th century faced a similar paradox. Spain controlled the New World. Galleons laden with silver flowed into Seville. They were the richest power on earth. Yet the crown was perpetually broke. King Philip II was fighting wars on multiple fronts. The Netherlands, the Ottomans, England. The costs were astronomical. Instead of balancing the books, the crown relied on the constant influx of silver to service its debts. They borrowed against future treasure fleets. They flooded the domestic economy with money, but produced no new goods. The result was the price revolution for a peasant in Castile. The world turned upside down. The cost of living soared while wages stagnated. Landowners and the nobility, who held real assets, survived. Laborers and those living on fixed incomes were crushed. The empire defaulted on its debts for times during Philip's reign alone. The signal was the reliance on easy money to fund structural deficits. The outcome was a century of decline, just like the Spanish reliance on silver inflows. The Weimar Republic in Germany demonstrated how quickly this dynamic accelerates in an industrial economy. In 1914, facing the outbreak of World War I, Germany suspended the convertibility of the mark to gold. This was the signal. The government needed to fund a total war, and taxation was insufficient. They chose to print the difference. For 9 years, the illusion held together, masking the structural rot. The working class continued to save in paper marks, believing the government's promise that the currency would regain its value after the victory. But the victory never came and the debts remained. By 1923, the arithmetic asserted itself with brutal speed. The government, burdened by reparations and a paralyzed industrial base, turned the printing presses to maximum capacity. The result is well documented. But think about the human cost. A university professor who had saved his entire life for a comfortable retirement found that his life savings could not purchase a cup of coffee. The incentive structure inverted overnight. Those who held debt were rewarded as their liabilities evaporated. Those who held cash or government bonds were annihilated. The rational move was to spend money the second it was received, or better yet, to borrow as much as possible to buy hard assets. The society fractured not because of the war itself, but because the mechanism of value transfer, the currency, had been weaponized against the saver. The pattern repeats in 7 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the era of sound money, where the currency is pegged to a hard asset or strictly limited in supply. Stage 2 is the expansion, usually driven by public works or military conquest, leading to Stage 3, the accumulation of unpayable debt. This triggers Stage 4, the most critical moment, the signal. This is when the sovereign decouples the currency from reality to service the debt. Stage 5 is the delay, where inflation rises but is dismissed as transitory or manageable. Stage 6 is the flight to assets, where smart money abandons the currency for land, gold, commodities, or foreign equities. Finally, Stage 7 is the collapse and reset, where the wealth transfer is finalized and a new system is established. Just like the suspension of the gold standard in 1914, we see the modern financial system navigating the later stages of this cycle. Since the pivotal changes in global monetary policy around 2008 and 2020, the balance sheets of major central banks have expanded at a pace that has no historical precedent outside of wartime. The incentive is clear, with sovereign debt levels at record highs relative to GDP. The only mathematical way to prevent default is to manage the real cost of that debt through currency depreciation. The interest payments on national debts now consume significant portions of tax revenue. Under these constraints, the rational move for policymakers is to ensure that the currency loses value faster than the interest accumulates. There is a common counter-argument to this historical determinism. Many economists argue that modern central banks possess tools that Nero and the Weimar Republic did not. They point to digital infrastructure, global swap lines, and the ability to target inflation with precision. They suggest that because the debt is denominated in a currency the state controls, technical default is impossible, while it is true that a sovereign with a printing press need not formally default. This view ignores the difference between nominal and real solvency. Paying a bondholder back in currency that buys half as much as it did when the bond was issued is a default in all but name. The mechanism has changed, but the arithmetic of purchasing power remains absolute. The resolution of this pattern historically follows one of three paths. The first is a controlled decline, similar to the British Empire after World War II. The pound sterling lost its status as the world reserve currency, and the UK endured decades of austerity, capital controls, and a diminishing standard of living, but the society remained largely intact. The second path is chaotic collapse, as seen in the Soviet Union or Weimar Germany, where the political structure disintegrates alongside the currency, leading to a vacuum of power and immense social suffering. The third and most common endgame is a reset and restructure. This occurred with the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. After a period of chaos and war, the major powers gathered to repeg currencies and establish new rules of the game. This usually involves a devaluation of the old currency against real assets or a new anchor. Estimates range regarding when such a reset might occur in the modern context, but the pressures building within the sovereign debt markets suggest the current trajectory is unsustainable. The only variable is timing and pain. To prepare, one must focus on education and resilience. Understand the difference between currency and money. Pay attention to the data, not the headlines. Subscribe to continue this investigation into the history of money and power.